Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Japan and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are another relatively new addition to the Japanese beer scene. I've been aware of them for a few years, but until now I hadn't actually come across any of their cans. But the beer that we're going to look at today is a style that I do quite enjoy, but it's one that I really don't come across all that often. And it is one that came as a recommendation from someone I trust quite a lot when it comes to craft beer. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up toward Tokyo. We're going to go out to the west of the city into the prefecture to a little place called Okutama, which is supposed to be very, very beautiful. And that means that we're going to have a look at my first beer from Vertere, who I've wanted to feature on the channel for quite some time. So this particular beer is called Anthocharis. It comes in at 6% ABV, and this one is a sour IPA. So yeah, not often that I get the chance to review a sour IPA, and this beer actually came as a recommendation from Rika at Liquor Shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Amaichi here in Osaka. So yeah, I learned about this brewery through keeping an eye on their Facebook page over the years. I wanted to get something from them for quite some time, and now we finally have it. And this was Rika's favourite beer out of the 4 that she had in the shop from Vertere. So yeah, I think we should crack on and see what this beer is all about. My first sour IPA in quite some time, and definitely cool to feature Vertere on the channel for the very first time. And hopefully we'll do more reviews from these guys in the future. But anyway, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future from Vertere. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go up to the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from that area, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with many other things, and you can have a little look at the playlist of beer from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, andLl tell you a wee bit about Vertere for the first time. So, Vertere, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in a little place called Okutama in the western part of Tokyo Prefecture, and you can get there in about 1.5 hours by train from central Tokyo. So the two men behind this company are Hikaru Suzuki and Kage Sujinogi. And these, Sujinogi of course is the brewer, but apparently these two guys had dreamed of starting a company together since they were in high school. And Kage actually worked in a brew pub called Koinji and then spent 3 years learning how to brew and perfecting his own recipes. But the company started up in a small, well, it's actually fairly big when you look at the pictures, but an old 70-year-old traditional house about 30 seconds from the front of Okutama Station. But apparently it took them over 6 months to renovate this property and get it ready to host the restaurant and brewery. So they started off with 3 taps when they opened in 2015, but they soon upgraded their system to 10 taps, and all of these taps are now occupied by their own beers, which is pretty cool. But the brewing takes place in a small hut of about 7.5 square metres behind the restaurant and bar counter, and at the moment they have 2 brew kits, one 500 litre and one 1000 litre brew kit, and they've gradually expanded their fermentation capacity over the years as well, and I think they've expanded the actual brewery building, if you like, too, from what I understand. So we'll need to go up and have a look at it at some point. But in 2018, they also started cultivating their own hops in a field about 20 minutes drive away from the house, and they've been working to build up the harvest year on year. They started canning their beers in 2019, and they released their first cans in September of that year, and that's probably about the time that I saw the first one on the Liquor Shop Asahiya Facebook page. But as of April 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 85 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they do a variety of different styles, but I think it's mainly IPAs that I've seen from these guys so far. Different kinds of IPAs. New England's, West Coast. I think I've seen 1 or 2 black IPAs as well, if I'm not mistaken. And of course they do a number of fruited sours and fruit IPAs and sour IPAs and stuff like this as well. So yeah, a very interesting brewery who are not afraid to try different things, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to feature these guys on the channel as soon as I could. But yeah, that is everything I think I can tell you about this brewery. 85 beers so far on Untappd, which is quite impressive. But yeah, if you get the chance to check out some of their beers, why not? But if you want to learn more about this brewery, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So I took a couple of notes on the beer, on the ingredients and things. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, this one is a 6% sour IPA. It's brewed with American two-row malts, flaked oats, and it's got a little bit of Carapils in there, which is a German malt. The hops in this one are Eldorado and Chinook. We know both of these hops quite well. Eldorado is from the US, about 12% alpha acid normally. Gives you quite a pineapple-y and kind of mango-y quality in my experience. Chinook is one of the big old school boys of American hops. I think it's about 14% alpha acid, gives you that big pine resiny character and quite a strong grapefruit normally. But the yeast in this one is where it gets really interesting. They've got a mix of American ale yeast and lactobacillus in here, so this should make for quite an interesting beer, I have to say. The name, Anthocharis, this is actually a genus of butterfly, and these butterflies are typically kind of white in colour, white hued, and they've got colourful markings on the tips of their wings. So yeah, I didn't know that actually. I didn't really, when I did my chemistry degree, I did biology, biochemistry, physiology for the first 2 years. We actually didn't do too much about the genus, the Latin genus of different animals and things like that. So yeah, always cool to learn a wee bit about that. But quite a number of their beers are named after different, animal classifications, and a few of them have Latin names like this one. So yeah, another point of interest there. But as I said, this one is the Anthocharis Sour IPA, 6% ABV, from Vertere in Okutama in Tokyo Prefecture. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. So, a little bit of smoke coming out of the can as we open it up, and there we go. I should point out once again, this is a half-litre can, which seems to be catching on a little bit in Japan actually. A number of breweries are now doing their beers in these things. As you'll see over the course of the next few videos, I did get quite a few 500ml cans this time from different breweries. I think the first one to really do this was West Coast Brewing, and a number have started to follow suit with this actually. But yeah, this one, I believe this beer cost me about 1,000, maybe 1,000 or 1,100 yen, so that's about $10 American, somewhere in the region of €9 and about £8 sterling, something like that. Craft beer, of course, is a bit more expensive in Japan because all the ingredients are imported, pretty much all of them, I should say. They don't really produce barley and things that much here in Japan. It's more rice production and stuff, and of course the hops come from the US, New Zealand and Canada, so big import costs when it comes to actually making craft beer. But of course Japan is getting better at this all the time. But anyway, you can see this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from any modern IPA. Not much in the way of a head on this one. When we poured it out, it had about maybe 1/3 of a finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That has of course faded away to be a thinner foamy layer on top. Now just a little bit of wispiness in the middle of the glass there, and then a white ring around the edge. But yeah, as you can see, the colour of this beer is quite nice. It looks a little bit more like an American IPA rather than being a New England hazy or an outright West Coast IPA. It's like somewhere in the middle, to be honest with you. So in terms of colour, I would describe this one as being a kind of rich, deep yellow. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging you do or any adjuncts you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But I think in this case it's most likely just the different kinds of malts in this one. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head, but overall it does look pretty much as you would expect from a regular sour IPA. You would expect them to have a kind of yellowish colour like that. But yeah, nothing else I think we really need to say about the appearance of this one. So we can take a look at the aroma and see what it's all about. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's quite interesting, I have to say. Now, first off, I'm going to say that this beer, it doesn't have the most pungent of aromas, but you can definitely get the idea that there's something kind of funky going on with this one. It actually reminds me of a few, pardon me, of the Vertere beers from back home in Skåne in Sweden. So yeah, this one definitely has a wee bit of that funky lactobacillus type note to it, but above that you're getting quite a few notes of a regular IPA, so yeah, definitely like this. Let's just try and break this down then and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. Yeah, so on the in the backbone of this beer, it's really interesting because you are getting little bits of bread crust. So for me, there's a little bit of that kind of slightly more like a wholemeal brown bready bread crust. You can get a little bit of outright brown bread in there, but there's a little touch of a kind of woody, funky type character, and that will of course be the lactobacillus. So yeah, definitely getting a little bit of that in this one. Above that, you're getting some kind of softer white bready character, so that's going to be the two-row and the to a degree the carapils. And you can smell a little bit of that kind of crisp dryness from the carapils malt in this one as well. You can kind of just smell that in the top of the nose, if that makes sense. So yeah, you've got that bread crust, you've got the brown bready bread crust, a little bit of a woodiness, the kind of wholemeal brown bread in there, and then you've got, as I say, a little bit of white bread on top of that. The white bread isn't too thick and fluffy in the aroma, I would say. It actually comes across as being a little bit more crisp rather than anything else. Like I say, a little bit of Pilsner malty dryness in there, which helps bring out the woody, the slightly woody aspects of this beer, I would say. And then, yeah, you have the... yeah, you also have a little bit of sweetness in there, so I'm definitely getting a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. And then there's also, I do get a little hint of like a straight up caramel out of this one, to be honest with you, and that'll be from the carapils. You get that right in the middle of the nose, a slightly sweet straight up caramel, but a wee bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So the malty side of this beer is really interesting. The further that I go into this one as well, you start to get I get an almost little bit of like a farmhousey bready character out of this one from the yeast. I guess that'll be the American ale yeast rather than the lactobacillus. The lactobacillus, of course, gives you a little bit more of a it gives you a little bit of a more kind of woody, funky sort of thing. So this is quite an interesting beer from the aroma perspective, I have to say. So, on the hoppy side of things then, the green component, for me there's a little tiny bit of earthiness in there. I think that's more likely to come from the Chinook than it is from the Eldorado, but yeah, there's quite a nice green component to this one. I would say that overall, the green component is quite bright. There is a little touch of dankness in there, but not too much. But the green component for me is actually really bright in this one, and that's usually an indicator of late addition and dry hopping. Remember, when it comes to IPAs, 3 kinds of hopping. Early addition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly your bitterness. You know, the chemicals have got longer to be extracted from the hops. You've got late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly flavour and aroma, but a little bit of bitterness, and then dry hopping after the wort boil is complete gives you all flavour and aroma, if you like. So yeah, that's assuming a 90-minute wort boil, of course. It doesn't have to only be 90 minutes, but you get the idea. So yeah, for me, the green component in this one is quite bright in a sense, and that indicates late addition and dry hopping. Usually when you've got more depth and dankness to it, that comes from the early addition hops. So for me, the green component of this beer, there's a little bit of earthiness in there. I do get a little touch of herbal character too, which kind of binds the kind of lactobacillus funkiness together quite well. But then yeah, some nice bright floral aromaticity, good little bit of grassiness in there, and then yeah, lovely little bit of grassiness in there, as we say. And yeah, that all goes together with the lactobacillus. I think the green component really helps build the bridge between the more kind of regular beer part and the sour side of things with this one. So yeah, that's quite interesting. For me, the fruity side of this beer is quite nice as well. So you have got that slightly citricy quality from the lactobacillus, so you have got that underlying, you know, sort of oily pear, sort of lemony citricy type quality in there from the lactobacillus. But beyond that, there's a good little bit of pineapple from the El Dorado. I am getting little elements of apricot and maybe a wee touch of mango as well, and those will all be coming from the El Dorado. I don't really get the kind of grapefruity notes that I would normally expect from Chinook in this one, but yeah, it's an interesting aroma, this beer, I have to say. I've not had a sour IPA in a long time. I think, in fact, the last one would have been potentially one of the ones from Vault City back in the motherland of Scotland. So yeah, it's been a long time since I've had a wee look at a beer that fits into this particular style category. So yeah, aroma-wise for me, this beer is pretty interesting. It leans, the more and more that I smell of it, the more woodiness and funkiness and all these kind of things that come out of this one. So yeah, very good first impression of Vertere, I have to say, when it comes to the aroma. So yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to have a look at that aroma before you get stuck in, but it's now time to have a taste of this beer and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Anthocharis, if I've pronounced that correctly, a sour IPA at 6% ABV from Vertere in Okutama in the western part of Tokyo Prefecture. I really hope we can get up there and film an out and about video at some stage. That would be awesome. But let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers, kampai. Oh yeah, I have to say, that's pretty nice. It's quite different from the other sour IPAs I've had in the past. This one is definitely more, it really has a bit more of that kind of funky vibe to it actually. It's quite a quirky beer, this one, to be honest with you. I can see people with this one really liking the kind of quirkiness that it has, but not being quite sure where to place it, because this really is not like any beer that I've had in quite some time, I have to say. Yeah, this is one that you need to have a few sips of and just kind of let it build up a wee bit before you think about it, you know, before you kind of judge it or anything. Because it's the way this beer develops. I've always said, for me, when it comes to a sour beer, what I want from a sour beer is like a really nice transition. I want it to kind of come in and hit you with the sourness and then just mellow out really nicely. And this beer does that actually. It's not. It really leans a bit more toward the kind of funky side of things than it does toward the IPA side. But the IPA is definitely there. Yeah. It really is an interesting proposition, this one. I think Rika made a good choice in recommending me this beer, because it's yeah, it's definitely quite unusual, and that's what you want after 3,000, what are we on, 3,700 reviews now, I forget, but 3,700 reviews. You want things like this that are going to test your palate and make you think a little bit, and this beer certainly will do that. So yeah, first impression of this one is, it's quite easygoing and quite drinkable, which you would want from, you know, a 6% IPA of any variety. But the aftertaste on this one and the funkiness that it has really is quite different. And the profile of that funkiness that's in there is quite interesting as well, I have to say. So yeah, you know, this really is pretty cool, I have to say. But yeah, where do we start with this one then? Middle third of your palate. So the backbone of this beer, you can feel the base layer on that middle third of your palate. There's a nice little bit of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready, bread crusty character coming out of this one. On top of that, well actually within the bread crusty backbone, as you move further forward on that middle third of your palette, you start to get a little bit of a more kind of woody character out of the beer, and it's like an American oak. It's actually quite smooth and has almost a wee touch of like a vanilla quality to it. So yeah, the way that goes together is quite nice. You get more and more woodiness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that you go. On top of that kind of bread crusty and woody layer, you get a little bit of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready character coming out of this one, which is nice. So yeah, wholemeal, brown bready notes in there, fluffy white bread. Yeah, the fluffy kind of wholemeal. Definitely the kind of wholemeal brown bready character in this one actually builds a little bit of sweetness, I think, the further into the aftertaste you go. But above the wholemeal brown bread, you start to get a more kind of white bready sort of note out of this one, and the bread itself actually has a little bit of that woody kind of funkiness to it, which I find quite interesting as well. Above that though, toward the back of the middle third of your palette, you get a little bit of the kind of Pilsner malty dryness coming out of this one, but definitely in the centre of that middle third of your palette, you can feel in the dead centre there's a wee bit of a straight up caramel from the carapils, and then as you move further out toward the edges of that middle third of your palette, it's got a bit more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type character to it. So yeah, I really do like how that pieces together in this one. That gets a big thumbs up for me. The middle third of your palette in this beer is really interesting, and as I say, quite different to a number of other beers that I've had in recent times. So, in terms of the back third of the palette then, I think we've said everything we really need to about the middle third of your palette. So the border region between middle and back third of your palette, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. So yeah, a nice little bit of bready build up in there, kind of like a mix of white and brown bread, but the base layer of that back third of your palette, again you've got a wee bit more of that kind of brown bready bread crust in there. As I've always said though, kind of more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palette, sweeter flavours tend to come out further forward. So yeah, you can feel the bread crusty note in there, it feels that little bit drier. On top of that you've got the brown bready layer, which feels a little bit more tall and airy, I would say. Then above that you've got the fluffy, you've got the more fluffy white bready layer as well, and again that feels a little bit more tall and airy. Above that you do get a little bit of the Pilsner malty dryness just creeping over the top of the bready notes, but above everything on that back third of the palette there's a little bit of a kind of more farmhousey. There's a little bit of a more farmhousey and kind of yeasty, bready character coming out of this beer. So yeah, I really do like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, the farmhousey, bready character in this beer is quite interesting. The yeasty character has a little bit of woodiness to it, a little bit of fluffy white bread, and yeah, that just lingers there into the aftertaste too. So this beer, the lactobacillus, really is giving you this woody, bready, funky type thing that you would expect of it. But yeah, the flavour on the back third of the palette is definitely taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of the palette, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, on to the hoppy side of things then. I'm just going to put a little bit more of the beer into the glass for this one. So yeah, there we go. My OCD, we've got to get the thing lined up properly for the video. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of the beer then, the back corners of the palette, absolutely you've got a little bit of an earthiness in there. The smoothness of the earthy character just pushes forward a little bit, and you've got a little touch of herbal note to this beer as well, so you can feel that. But as you come further forward toward the front corners of your tongue, you get more floral character. But this beer isn't too kind of big and bold and bitter, if you like. It's actually a little bit more kind of it's a little bit more yeah, I would say it's a little bit more kind of just smooth in the green component actually, but round the front curve of your palette it's a little bit lighter and more grassy. yeah, quite interesting, I have to say. I do like that you actually do get a little bit of bitterness out of this one. The further into the aftertaste you go, in fairness, you can feel a little bit of the floral character pushing its way out of this beer, but it's actually quite well balanced with the kind of sour and funky side of things. So yeah, really interesting from that perspective too. Let's kind of round off the tasting section then with a wee look at the front third of your palate and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in this one, and it's kind of a mix of white and brown bread in there, and it's got a bit of dryness to it as well, but the base of that front third of your palate, it's got a little bit of a woodiness, there's a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty note in there, and you also have a wee mix of kind of brown and white bread, and then above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. But with this beer, since it's a sour one as well, we have to talk about the kind of impact fruits that you get from the lactobacillus. So when you take this beer in, it does have a little bit of that kind of sharper sour character to it, but it mellows out really nicely, like I say. So you get this sharp tartness in there, it's like an oily pear, it's got a wee bit of that kind of lemony, limey type citricy note to it, and that does linger there above the hoppy fruits into the aftertaste. So like I say, above the kind of bready layer, you get that nice oily bubble where the fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. For me, the fruits that are coming out of the hops in this beer are quite interesting too. So toward the back of that front third of your palate, you can perhaps get a little tiny bit of grapefruit from the Chinook, but as you come further forward, you get like a softer, juicy mango. As you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, it's got like a softer kind of apricot-y character, and maybe a little bit of a kind of brighter pineapple for me. And as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's got there's like a sort of limey and gooseberry type flavour coming out of this one, which is quite interesting because I wouldn't expect that of El Dorado or of Chinook, to be honest with you. So yeah, the hoppy fruits for me, definitely a little bit of grapefruit, a little bit of kind of mango, some drier apricot and pineapple, and then a wee bit of an almost limey character as well. But I do wonder how much that lime and stuff is coming from the yeasty side of things. So yeah, really interesting, and from that perspective, I have to say. But yeah, flavour-wise, this beer is really nice. Like I say, it's the more that you drink of this one, the more it leans toward the woody and funky side of things, but it does definitely have a wee bit of the IPA bitterness and fruitiness and stuff like that. But the malty side of this beer takes a bit of a back seat to the lactobacillus in my mind. So yeah, for me, really interesting beer, a very good recommendation from Rika. Let's round off the video then with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise, this one for me is quite, to be honest, this one's kind of right in the middle of the spectrum. It's bottom end of mid-bodied to the middle part of mid-bodied. The carbonation's very smooth, it has quite a nice clean mouthfeel to it, a little touch of oiliness, but not overly much. In terms of the IBU count in this beer, I would say that it sits somewhere around the kind of typical 25 or 30 IBU mark, but it could be slightly higher than that. You do get a little bit of bitterness out of this beer, to be fair, the further into the aftertaste you go. But the malty base, like I say, a little bit of a kind of dry bread crusty note out of it. The fluffy white bread's in there as well. You do get a little touch of sweetness, but I think the sweetness takes a little bit of a back seat to the This beer has quite a bit of dryness to it, generally speaking, and I think that's why the woodiness shines in this one so much. So yeah, about 30 IBUs, mix of smoothness and sweetness, but mainly dryness from the malt base for me. The sour side of this beer, it isn't madly sour, this one, it's more kind of funky, to be honest. So yeah, nice little bit of funkiness to it, wet fruity character, and it's mainly like a dry tropical fruit note and a wee bit of a citricy character that you're getting out of this one. So yeah, really interesting beer, this one. Definitely a very good recommendation from Rika, and I think for my next review from Vertere, we'll need to have a look at something that's a wee bit more conventional and see how they do that side of things, because that's the reason that this brewery kind of caught my eye. They were doing a mix of kind of more conventional stuff and then things that were a bit more unusual, such as this sour IPA. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. So yeah, this was the Anthocharis, a 6% sour IPA from Vertere Brewery in Okutama in the west of Tokyo Prefecture. Yeah, really interesting beer, this one, and a big thank you to Rika from Liquor Shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Match here in Osaka for the recommendation. Really, really cool review, and definitely a very, very good introduction to Vertere, our first review of them here on Rampant Lion Reviews. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Vertere as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the very near future. In the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I will see you guys very shortly. And do make sure, pardon me, that you check out Liquor Shop Asahiya here in Osaka too. Very good selection of Japanese beers, and you'll see more of those featuring in the upcoming videos. So until then, Slanja, Skull, cheers, Kampai. Make sure you check out Vertere in Okutama, Tokyo Prefecture.